Hey VCers, it's Matt. So we come to 1973 and we get two Kinks albums. The first one being the Great Lost Kinks Album, which is a great album. Unfortunately, I don't have a copy of that anymore. I've used to have it. I've heard it. It got cut out really quickly. It is like the year before they did the Kinks Chronicles. The Kinks used to be on Reprise Records. They've since moved over to RCA in 1971. So they're now currently on RCA. In 1973, Reprise put out the Kinks Chronicles, which is a double album. Some of their cream of the crop songs from '66 to '70. One of the best compilation albums ever made. I did a review on that. You can look at that. The Great Lost Kinks album collects songs that were unreleased. They were songs from the '67, '68 era. A lot of songs that were written for the Village Green Preservation album, and Dave Davies was planning to do a solo album at one time, and some of those songs are on it. So I need to get a copy of that, and I'll do a proper review on that when I get a copy. I just don't have it, so it's worth checking out if you can find it. It never was put out on CD. It was only put out on vinyl, and it was cut out pretty quickly. I think it was only around for a year or so before it was cut out of the catalog. But second album, 1973, is the Kinks Preservation Act I. There's the back cover, and where the Kinks were a four-piece band in the '60s, we now have all of these characters are in the Kinks. However many people are in there, there's 15 or so. So read interviews with Dave Davies. There's Dave right there, who later interviews where he said he kind of lost track of who was in the Kinks in the '70s because people came and went from album to album. The constant was Ray and Dave Davies, and Mick Avery, the drummer, stayed up until about 1982. But had a lot of people in the Kinks. So this album is yet another concept album and rock opera affair, which Ray Davies would bother us with throughout the '70s up through about '77 or so. And it is I guess it's based on the great Kinks or the Village Green Preservation Society album from 1968, which I did a lengthy review of, my second favorite album of all time. This, of course, is nowhere near the quality of that album. But the thing is, way back when I got into the Kinks properly in 1980, I bought the One for the Road, the double live album that came out in 1980. I really liked that. I've said this before, but around about the same time, it might have even been the same day I bought that album, I bought this issue of Cream magazine, which had a big article on the Kinks, and the writer goes through album by album of all of their records up to 1980. He really loves the '60s albums. He liked Low Budget, and he liked One for the Road, the then new live album. He just really ripped into and couldn't stand the '70s albums and just tore them apart. Well, having had One for the Road, the second album I went and bought was Kinks of the Village Green Preservation Society, based on this article. He calls it possibly the best album ever. And he also had a line in there that said it's an album that's 100 years out of place one way or the other. That intrigued me, so I went and bought the album, fell in love with it immediately. And I bought all their other '70s albums, and then I bought the '80s albums up through word of mouth. None of those were out at this time, but I just all their '60s albums. I think I said '70s, but I didn't bother with the '70s albums just because this guy ripped them apart so much that I figured they weren't worth the time. Some friends of mine that were into the Kinks had some of those albums, so I heard bits and pieces of them. But so when I was starting the Kinks review series, I had all the '60s albums. I thought I'd do all of those up through Lola, and then I would pick up with Low Budget from 1979 and go forward from there. But when I got to Lola, I figured, well, let me get Muswell Hillbillies, and then I figured, well, let me just go ahead and get all of them. So I went ahead and bought these '70s albums. And so this is kind of a new listening experience for me, because even though I've heard bits of these albums way back when, I've never really sat down and had a proper listen to them. So a lot of this is as new to me as it is to you, maybe, unless you have these albums and already know them. And what I did was I've been playing these albums. I didn't do a review last week because I just wasn't in the mood, but trying to do one or two a week. But I've been going through these albums in chronological order, and I don't just slap them on and give it one listen and say that's great or that's terrible. I've been playing them throughout the week several times to kind of get into them and get familiar and get a feel for them. So, and I said in one of my other videos that a lot of these albums when they came out were not, at least 70s Kinks albums were not well received critically, and I don't think fans were that crazy about them, the fans who remembered their 60s stuff. But it's sort of like the Beatles solo albums of the time. A lot of those weren't really well received at the time because it was too close to the Beatles, and as great as a lot of the Beatles solos albums are, they're really not in the same league as the Beatles, and the same with this Kinks stuff. But now, 40 years later, enough time has passed to kind of look at these on their own attributes or merits and not compare them to what came in the 60s. So I really thought this album would be lousy, or I was expecting it to be, being that this was the last one that I reviewed, and this is pretty lousy. I think it has a couple of songs on it that are halfway decent, but that's about it. The live album's okay. So I was thinking this is going to be lousy too, because I'd read that it's lousy and just didn't expect much from it. Kind of surprised me because I actually like this album a little bit, and it's not any way, shape, or form does it compare to their 60s stuff, but it's not a half bad album. And I'm not a big fan of rock operas or that sort of silliness usually, even though the Kinks with Arthur did the greatest rock opera concept album of all time, in my opinion, because it does tell a story if you care about that, but it's also the songs on an individual basis stand up if you just want to listen to the songs and don't care about the story. This one has a little bit of a story to it too. It kind of, just like Village Green was also a concept album, this sort of takes a look at the Village Green town and the people that inhabit it, and some of the other things like politicians and change not always being a good thing, the out with the old, in with the new sort of, business developers, which is kind of something that I am in agreement with. I'd rather have mom and pop restaurants than another Subway or Starbucks coffee on the corner. So, but yeah, we can, let's see here. And then you get the album and you get a lyric sheet. So I would show you the record, but it's sitting on the turntable and I don't feel like getting up and going over there and bringing it over here. So, yep. What else? What else? Okay, so we're just kind of song by song. One other thing I've read. I didn't see the Kinks in 1973. I was 10 years old, so I did see them in 80, 83, and 85, which were really fun concerts. But basically, with these concept rock opera album things of the 70s, when they would do a show, they would come out, they would do the latest album, and that would be sort of a concert slash theatrical production, stage play, whatever big deal thing. They would sort of do the album. They would have costume changes and people running around the stage playing characters and sets and some expository dialogue explaining the story. So I've read where people say that even though these albums weren't great, in the live setting they worked a lot better because the story made more sense and it kind of brought the music alive more with the whole production, yada yada yada, which may or may not be. Not having been there, I can't really say, but I can kind of see how that might be the case. So they do their concert, and the first half of the concert would be the latest concept rock opera album. Then they take a break and they'd come back and they'd just play some of their old songs, the 60s stuff and Lola or whatever, like a regular concert setting. But so yeah, we start this with Morning Song, and these songs are all listed as being sung by different people. We got the chorus, The Tramp. One song's sung by the working class man, middle class man, and upper class man. Another is sung by Johnny Thunder in the chorus. Johnny Thunder, of course, being one of the great songs on Village Green album. Song sung by the Vicar. Another by the chorus and Mr. Black. And another by the chorus and the Housewives, and etc., etc. But anyway, so Morning Song is just sort of a humming musical intro, kind of a choir sounding thing, like they had the intro to Gone with the Wind, I guess, or in a play you get that. And in a way, it's almost a gospel sounding song in some respects too, but it's no real lyrics, just humming, but a nice little intro to the album. Daylight is sort of a look at the town, like Ray Davies is up above looking down at the town and pointing out, all there's the bakery, there's the people, there's the church, there's the neighborhoods. It's kind of a neat setup, and what I like about that is that it sounds, if you've ever seen musical stage plays where you've got people marching around the stage and this person's singing and then this person starts singing and someone over here starts singing, and so you got some of that. You can kind of see this little stage play in your head. I kind of like that, and the song's kind of neat. It's got a nice kind of brass band trumpet playing through it. Not a bad song. Sweet Lady Genevieve is often called one of the Kinks' Great Lost classic Kinks song. I don't sure that I get that so much for two reasons. I like the song and I don't like the song. It's musically and the singing and the music is really nothing spectacular or memorable. The lyrics I like, the story I like. It's a guy. This was one of those that's sung by the Tramp, and he's singing to Genevieve. So Genevieve and this guy were boyfriend, girlfriend back when they were young, and he either took her for granted and didn't realize what he had, or he did her wrong. And now this song takes place 20, 30 years later when they're older. He realizes that what he's lost and what he did wrong, and he comes back to Genevieve and sort of saying, I made a big mistake, take me back, by and large. So, and I like that there's not really a resolution. You don't get to find out if we don't know if Genevieve forgives the guy and takes him back, or if she, kicks him in the nuts and sends him packing, which I kind of like the end of the Sopranos. I like that open-ended nature because you can sort of write your own ending, I guess. There's a change in the weather. Is one with different working class, middle class, and upper class men singing, which is all Ray Davies, but pretty good song. It's not bad. Where Are They Now is a pleasant song. I like it. It's no great shakes, but one of the survivors is Johnny Thunder. Is again, that's a song on the Village Green album, and he's kind of the stuck in the past guy. He likes rock and roll music in the 50s, and for him, the world stopped being interesting post 1959. One of those type guys, which I can kind of relate to. But it's not a bad song. It's a little bit of lazy songwriting because lyrically, Ray just name checks a bunch of Little Richard and Dion and the Belmonts and reels off the names of a bunch of 50 singers and rock and roll bands. But I do like, it does have sort of it has a 50s rock and roll sound to it, which is also a bit lazy, but it also has a little bit of a Velvet Underground sound, oddly enough. Sort of was reminded of a couple of songs on Loaded, the last Velvet Underground album. And about halfway, 3/4 of the way through the song, there's this vocal breakdown where the Kinks do this Beach Boys. Sounds just like the Beach Boys. They do this kind of a cappella, different voices, And the Kinks doing the Beach Boys is a strange thing, but oddly enough it works and it's kind of cool. So that takes us to side 2. Song Cricket is kind of a New Orleans old-timey feeling song. Oh, hell. Otis, hush.